Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. My name is Letitia Latiker, and I am the co chair of the Social Action and Political Awareness and Involvement Committee of the Jackson, Mississippi alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And we are so thankful and so appreciative of you taking time out of your busy schedules to come and learn from us from this panel how policy impacts the personal. On behalf of our chapter president, Ms. Nakisha Davis, our first vice president, Ms. Wanaki Taylor, and our second vice president, Ms. Latoya Reed, I welcome you all to this panel. There will be a lively and a wonderful discussion about the policies on the federal, state, and local levels and how those policies impact our everyday lives and how those policies should drive us to be engaged voters as well as encourage our friends, family, and loved ones to be engaged voters. Without further ado, I will introduce you to our moderator, and from there, our select panel members, and from there, we will begin the panel. I now introduce you to Ms. Phaedra Bratton Robinson, who will serve as our moderator for this evening. Ms. Phaedra?
Thank you, Letitia, and thank you so much to the Jackson, Mississippi alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta for hosting this really, really important panel so that people can understand how policy decisions that are made by those we elect impact our personal lives. And so we have two great panelists with us this evening who will share their expertise and their personal experience in dealing with policies that have changed their lives and policies that they have to deal with in trying to help others. So tonight I will start with Vidi. Vidi, will you please introduce yourself to the people?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'd also like to reiterate my gratitude to Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, the Jackson Alumni Chapter, for inviting me to participate in this panel this evening. As Phaedra mentioned, my name is Vidi Banzai. I am a staff attorney at the Southern Poverty Law Center here in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm originally from right outside of Detroit, Michigan, and I moved to Jackson about 4 years ago. I call Jackson home now, and I'm very proud of it. In my day job as an attorney at the SPLC, I have previously done work in the criminal justice reform space, doing primarily prison conditions work in both youth and adult facilities. And I'm currently actually working in our immigrant justice project where I represent immigrant communities in lawsuits and actions that address, basically xenophobia across the South. So I'm really excited to be here this evening and to talk more about policy and how policy intertwines with legal work and how being engaged in policy is important and valuable in making long-term sustainable change.
Thank you, Vidi. Next, we'll have Rashid Davis. Rashid, will you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Rashid Davis. I'm from Canton, Mississippi. I'm a barber. I'm the owner of a Head of the Class barbershop in Canton, Mississippi. I'm an entrepreneur. And today I'm a member of the Southern Poverty Law Center also. And today I just want to kind of get my expertise on from the local level. I've been having lately barbershop justice talks where we have been getting people at a local level to come in and try to get them out and encourage them to get out and vote. Like I said, hey, how everybody doing?
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Davis.
And before we begin, Phaedra, I do want to apologize and say that our other panelist, Ms. Maisie Brown, did indicate she had a family function to rise at the last minute, but she was committed to attending. I know the flyers indicated two other panelists, but Ms. Maisie Brown did indicate that she was unable to attend, and she did send her regards and her regrets. And Ms. Rukia Lumumba is, I believe, tied up with other items, but we are expecting her to join later on in the panel. And so with that being said, I will turn the floor over to Ms. Phaedra Robinson.
Thank you again, Letitia. As the title of the panel states, policy impacts the personal. So every decision that officials make, the officials we elect to represent us, impacts our personal lives on some level, whether it's healthcare, education, state funding, concerning welfare, prison systems, whatever the issue is that you are addressing, there is a rule, a law, or a policy that impacts that. And so we want to talk about something that happened in very recent history, which is the Dobbs case. And so, Biddy, we know that this case impacted a woman's healthcare options that she could partake in when she was making decisions about the care of herself or her unborn child. What are some of the implications of the Dobbs case that may have been unintended or intended consequences that we're seeing?
You know, I think the most obvious consequence of the Dobbs decision is that women just have fewer options. And I think, you know, living in a country where women are already fighting an uphill battle, the decision has created a situation in which our healthcare freedom is severely limited. In a state like Mississippi, where those limitations have been creeping up on us for quite some time, this may not be as aggressive or seem as shocking to folks, but in other places across the country, we're seeing a serious curtailing of access to the right to choose. And excuse me, particularly these consequences are going to be significantly, disparately borne by women of color. We're looking at a state, you know, speaking to Mississippi specifically, we have a population of women of color that is far larger than most of the rest of the nation. And we are also have communities, women in the state of Mississippi who are severely impoverished. We live in a state where Medicaid is not accessible to many, many people, and the state government refuses to expand Medicaid. So when you have policies like this that are in place, and then this big federal policy gets added on top where you have no access to a health choice, you are forced into a much more dire situation. So for example, women who may want to exercise the right to choose, no longer have no other option. So women may have to take to term a pregnancy that is not viable, a pregnancy that is unsafe to her or to the fetus. Or, you know, they may end up having a child into a society that is not supportive of women having children, particularly if you are a poor woman in that state. So although this is a healthcare consequence, the consequences are vast and they impact people far beyond what happens in a doctor's office. And more importantly, this impacts folks before they even decide to have children or before they even walk into the doctor's office, because it changes the calculus for everything that somebody may decide to do with their life. And, you know, we really need to think about that. We need to think about the greater umbrella of issues that come from a decision like Dobbs. The very direct impact is not being able to get an abortion in the state of Mississippi. But we still have extremely high maternal mortality rates here in the state of Mississippi. We have extreme poverty in the state of Mississippi for women and children. And our state policies are not necessarily doing anything to improve those situations. So the intended consequence was probably, let's stop allowing people to have abortions. The unintended consequences are vast. Frankly, I don't know if they're actually unintended or not, but those consequences are vast and they go well beyond what happens in a doctor's office.
Absolutely. And thank you for your response to that, Biddy. One of the things that we have seen of late is that we've seen women who are dealing with chronic conditions who have been taking medication for years that was accessible to them. But that medication, because now there's a side effect that it could possibly cause a spontaneous abortion, is now no longer available to those women. And that's one of the I think, unintended consequences that we see with a decision like Dobbs. What would you say are some ways that people can weigh in on that now that that decision has been made in the state of Mississippi? has used that to outlaw abortions in our state. What are some ways that people can still allow their voice to be heard around that issue?
I think voting is the most obvious way. I won't say it's the easiest way, because it is not. The right to vote is not a guaranteed right to vote, which I'm sure Mr. Davis can speak more to. But voting is, our number one way to change the makeup of the legislature and to change and to impact the policies that are made in our state and across our nation. So right now we live in a state that is majority Black, but we have a very, we don't have a very diverse legislature. Our legislature does not reflect the diversity of our state. We have one Black state federal representative to Congress. And that's by design. But we can start to change those things. Our voting power, the voting power of people of color is very, very strong. And we need to get out there and we need to vote. And we need to encourage everybody around us to get to vote, to get to the polls, whether young, old, give somebody a ride, make sure that they have their ID, they have everything that they need. So voting, I think, is the easiest way to do that. Another way is to just really get engaged, to get educated, to do your research and find out how these issues are impacting other people. In my personal experience, I have found that the best way to, quote unquote, convince people is to talk about personal experiences and to make these issues hit close to home. It's unfortunate that it takes that for some people, but kind of building bridges with people and sharing those personal experiences, I have found is a really effective way to engage with folks and to push people to see things from a different perspective. So, specifically, we're talking about things like the unintended consequences of not being able to choose to get an abortion. You have women who are carrying non-viable pregnancies to term because they cannot get an abortion in this state. That is painful. It is emotionally taxing for people to have to do that. And unless you have seen someone who is going through that, you will, and even if you see somebody who is going through that, you can't imagine the toll that is taking on somebody. These are stories that need to be shared broadly and widely. And I think it's very important for us to engage and to organize around these issues so that we can convince folks that our future is truly on the line.
And we agree. We do need people to stand up, to be heard, and to exercise their right to vote, which leads us to Mr. Davis. Mississippi has the highest rate of incarceration in the world right now. And the majority of those who are incarcerated are Black men. Not only do we have the highest rate of incarceration, we have a very punitive system that says for certain felonies that you commit, you lose your right to vote. And it's a right that's lost for a lifetime. You can go through a process to try to get your right to vote restored, but it is a very contentious process that is long, it's temperamental, and in most cases, they do not restore a person's right to vote. Mr. Davis, how has this impacted you in your life? This really negative policy of not restoring a person's right to vote. You're on mute.
Well, sorry about that. It affects us in a way where it affects me, and it affects us in a way where your right to vote determines a lot about your community. The community. Yesterday we was talking, and we had an alderman in, I think Alderman Tim Taylor, and he was explaining a lot of things to people about voting, and the thing that you can vote if the people think when you have just basically people think when you have a felony that you can't vote, period. They just think that's right. So a lot of people don't get out to vote because they feel like, oh man, I've been to prison before, so I lost my right to vote. They don't even go and try to vote. They don't try to go get registered. So, and then in other incidents, a lot of people feel like when they vote, it doesn't, the outcome that they are looking for, they don't get. So when people feel like that, they feel like, hey man, what am I voting for? You know what I mean? And in other instances, um, you will have someone like me, being a convicted felon.
Mhm.
How can we voice our opinion if a lot of us can't vote? I me myself. So what I've done, if I've gotten out and helping other people that can vote get out to vote. Um, People that don't know or think they have certain felonies or just a felony. Um, I get out in the community. I've been having these barbershop talks every week. For the last 2 weeks, I'm going on my third week. So we're getting there. And a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people that has that felony, they just feel like they don't have a right to vote. I just feel like we should use social media or something, the way they use it in other ways to get this list out of certain things that you can't vote for and the things that the felonies that you do have that you can vote for because people don't know. And and by the ignorance of not knowing, then they just say, I'm not gonna vote, you know. And like
Wow.
you said, it's so many people that to me it's almost like a game. They get out, they arrested, they get arrested for petty crimes. They just want to make you a convicted felon. No matter what it is, just get you to take the plea bargain, whatever you're gonna do, just as long as you're gonna be a convicted felon. And in our neighborhood, when I turn around and I look, hey, it can be 5 people and 4 of us are convicted felons. You know what I mean?
Wow.
At various points in our life, because I'm 45 years old. So you had to go all the way down to young kids that's 18 years old, 19 years old, and all the way up. So that's in the age group. It doesn't vary because most people, hey, my age, you know, we went to the penitentiary. You know, then
Wow.
the younger kids they have, it's. But like I said, I think that we should get around to letting people know those crimes that people still can get out and vote, and the crime that they don't. And once we get the difference in between the two, I think we can get a lot of people out, more people out to vote.
Well, I want to first thank you for what you do in helping to support those who can vote and encouraging them and educating them on why they should vote. And I agree. There are 23 disenfranchising crimes that takes away your right to vote in Mississippi, and we will do all that we can to make sure that that information is shared broadly with people so they will know that these are the only crimes that they can take away your right to vote. One thing that I do want to ask you, because you have been at this for a while and you're one of the people who use your voice to make sure that people understand that, you know, um, this is unfair in how they take away your right to vote for a lifetime. What do you
Right.
think, or how do you think the state should create a system to restore your right to vote? What should that look like? Like what? Right now, there's an application process that has to go before the full House of Representatives for a vote. I don't know the statistics, but I think over the last 5 years, it's been maybe 2 or 3 people that have had their right to vote restored. And many of those people, they have had just led wonderful, successful lives for decades now, and they're still not giving them the right to vote. So, what do you think a fair process would look like in Mississippi to restore your right to vote?
Um, I think a fair process would be after you complete everything what you had to do as far as with your sentence, your probation, you paid all your fines out. I think after you do that, you should at least after 5 years, you should be restored your right to vote. Because if for 5 years you can show that you have been a productive citizen like everybody else, I think you should get your right to vote back. You complete all the programs that were required from the state. So someone that has completed all the programs, you paid all your fines, you did probation time, you did your parole time, I think their voting rights should be restored at least after 5 years, just to be fair.
We agree with you, Mr. Davis, and I think that's one of the ways, again, that we can have people to raise their voices on this issue. As it stands now, there's about 11 or 12% of the state's total population that have lost their right to vote. That's a significant number of people that could change what happens in these elections. And all of this, again, is by design. It's not just because somebody felt like this was an additional punishment. They do not want to see these numbers show up at the polls to vote, because voting is power. So thank you for all that you do and how you support your community through your programs in your barbershop. Ms. Lumumba has joined us. Good afternoon. Good evening, Rakia. How are you? Rakia, you're on mute. Okay. Well, maybe she'll hop in oh, there she is.
Sorry. I was having a little hard time. I appreciate y'all's patience. So good to be on with you all. Thanks. Can you repeat the question? Because I literally was trying.
Oh, no, we was just wanting you to introduce yourself.
Thanks. So, hey, everybody, Rakia Lumumba, she, her pronouns. I'm with the People's Advocacy Institute here in Jackson, Mississippi, and I also co-direct the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. So I'm really thankful to be invited here today. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, we want to start with a question that has a historical context in Mississippi. For decades, Mississippi has diverted funds for public schools in some manner into private coffers for private schools. And they attempted to do that again in 2022 when the state of Mississippi received the American Rescue Plan Act dollars to support public schools. They created a grant program and put $10 million in an account that was accessible only to private schools that apply for those accounts. Thankfully, Parents of Public Schools, which is an advocacy organization for parents, raised their voices in this and sued the state of Mississippi to say that this was not the way that you use public dollars. The case was heard a couple weeks ago, and we got a verdict out of Hinds County Chancery Court last week, which said that they were in violation of Section 208 of the state's constitution. And they could not use those dollars for private schools. So our question to you this evening is basically how, looking at the policies that we deal with around education and all of the issues that we have around education funding, how does something like this impact the public's ability to be secure and feel confident that they're making the best decisions when it comes to school funding and how to utilize funds available for public schools?
So that question was for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, one, I think oftentimes people aren't even aware of the funding streams, how funding is allocated, the hurdles that the district has to go through, the hurdles that the city has to go through, all for money that is ours in the first place as taxpayers, money that is supposed to be going towards the fully funded education of our children, the excellent funding and excellent implementation of programs because they are fully funded for our students. And so I think that oftentimes, one, it impacts us because we don't know, and so we just feel like we're without. that it's something that the district is doing wrong. It's something that the city is doing wrong. It's something that the teachers are doing wrong. It's something that that school is doing wrong, because we don't have the knowledge and the information to know that actually we are working with a stressed system, funding stressed economically. And so what happens is that we blame the people closest to us for the problem instead of holding the state accountable for what dollars are supposed to come to us in order to fully fund our education system. And so I think that's one impact, because that can also, and this is an impact that most people don't even think about, or maybe they do. Let me not say that, is the impact of morale. When you feel as if your district is unable to, when your school is unable to produce the results, have the programs, have the facilities that are inviting, that are enriching in a way that causes excitement, but instead have to work with few dollars here and there and stretch it as far as you can, what happens is people begin to lose morale, right? Morale is low. And so I think that's an impact on the individual and on the family. And then I think the impact that I'll mention is the impact that it has directly on our students. The impact that is related directly to constantly being told something different and something new because of the lack of funding or the shift of how they want to allocate funding. And so now students have to take this test differently or take this other test. I remember, what was it, in 2018, was it? When the state tried to take over the school district.
Right.
And looking at that data, and I might get it a little wrong, but what I believe was that the test had changed within 5 years. It had changed almost 4 times. And the state test, the exact test that students had to take. And so, that's inconsistent. That causes instability for our young people too. And so, I hope I answered the question.
Oh, you did. You did in fabulous fashion. Thank you for that. As you were coming on, we were talking to Mr. Davis, and we were talking about the disenfranchisement of so many people in the state of Mississippi who have lost their right to vote because of a felony conviction. And we discussed briefly that we need to do more to make sure that people understand what those felonies are, so that they can see if they have the right to vote. And the second part of that was on the process, that the restorative process is so difficult to navigate, and that we're not seeing a lot of people being able to access the right to vote. So my question, Mr. Davis, and I will pose it to you, is what would be a better system to restore a person's right to vote?
Well, and I see some other, Mr. Davis, Vidi, all on here who can probably answer this question as well. But, one of the things that we were working on back in 2021, I guess just last year, after the great ballot initiative wins that we saw in 2020 with the legalization of medical marijuana, the change of the new state flag, creation of the new state flag, and the end of that Jim Crow era electoral college process. After those wins, across the board, organizations, advocacy groups were ready to put together some more ballot initiatives. And one of those ballot initiatives was around rights restorations. And a number of groups were thinking about how to do that. And so one of the ways that we really get to the root of that is if we amend the Constitution. If we do a ballot initiative, which at this point is a lot more difficult than it had been in the past due to the Supreme Court ruling that is now challenging our ability as residents, as citizens, to initiate our own ballot initiative. But through amendment to the Constitution, which actually is very slight, that allows for people, regardless of their criminal history, to be able to vote upon the end of their carceral time, is one way that we can see that happen across the board. The language has to be very specific. We've seen it in other places where, even though it is passed, like in Florida, they're now, preventing people from voting, saying that, yeah, you may have finished your carceral time, but you still owe fees and fines. So you can't vote until, your fees and fines are paid. And we're seeing some other ways that some other loopholes that the state is able to prevent folks from voting.
Wow. You did mention, as you were responding to that question about the overturning of the Jim Crow era laws around election. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yep. And one place to go and learn about like various different policies, legislative bills that are being introduced is Mississippi Votes. They have a policy tracker. So it is a really good tracker. Actually, you can go to msvotes.org and really whole list of policies that folks can just click on and learn more about. And so this ballot initiative, so the Jim Crow era electoral college piece. So the electoral college requires that on a federal level, the electoral college requires it actually determines, it's used to determine who becomes president of the United States, right? And so this is a smaller group of people who are allowed to carry a certain number of votes to help move us forward. Well, similarly, here in Mississippi, especially in a number of Black counties, of predominantly Black populated or indigenously populated counties or municipalities, there was a similar law. And so, but the folks that had those votes, those abilities, did not represent the majority of the people in that area, in that district, in that county. And so what would happen is that it would constantly cause a predominantly Black area to still be governed by someone white or non-Black, right? Over and over and over again. And so by eliminating that law, it allows for an expansion of the democracy so that residents who actually live there actually are voting for their choice and are not subjected to just fall in line with who a smaller group of people who don't represent the majority choose. I feel like I was rambling a little, but I hope y'all got it.
We got it. Thank you for that. And to bring this more locally, one of the ways that we've seen municipalities and counties weigh in on trying to support the reentry of our returning citizens is the ban the box on a lot of their applications. Are there other policies like that? First, can you explain what ban the box is? And then are there other policies like that you are aware of that would help support the disenfranchised community?
Yes, I can definitely talk. I feel like if I don't want to did everybody else, did they already talk? Okay, y'all just spoke to me. I was like, because I just know that their work also just speaks so much to this. Yes. And so I was just like, so forgive me. I'm always trying to be considerate and step back when I need to. But, so ban the box. So ban the box is so important here, y'all. Oh my goodness. So when we're talking about people coming home, have served their time, have paid their debt to society, coming home, and every time they fill out an application on a job application, there's a question. Many employers ask the question, have you been incarcerated? Have you been convicted of a crime? Right? That's the question that is asked. Have you been convicted of a crime? Sometimes they even say, have you been arrested? Right? And that's a more harmful question as well, because a number of people may have been, hundreds of people have been arrested versus how many have been convicted. But anyway, so this on the initial application is immediately can be seen as a red flag for employers and has caused many people not to get a job who are ready to be fully employed, who have done the work that they need to do to be out in the community working and taking care of their families, have paid their debt, as I said before. And so that box on that initial application prevents them from even being able to move forward in the job application process, in the job interview process, right? What we've seen, we also see it on housing applications. You also see it on college admissions applications. There was a study, one organization I worked for back, years ago. We did a study. It's the organization, the Center for Community Alternatives, and we did a study of over 200 colleges across the United States, colleges and universities, and found that that over 80% of them had that question on their college applications. Sure. And then not only did they have their questions, but there were several that also had a probation period or some type of period where they would follow or track the person for a period of time, or that person would have to check in every night with a security guard or had a curfew or different things like that. So we have, so I know that people are concerned about safety, and we all should be concerned about safety. But one of the ways that we're able to allow people a second chance is to actually allow them an opportunity to work, an opportunity to receive housing, an opportunity to expand their education. And so on the first initial application, that question doesn't necessarily need to be asked. If you like what you see on that application and it's time to do a background check and go deeper, let's talk about it then. But even then, there are organizations that can provide support to employers who want to hire people with criminal records, helping them to understand how to do that, how to support someone who's coming home and help them, be successful in that work environment.
Thank you for that. And Rakia, if you could share that information, we would love to push that out so that those who are listening can have that as a resource because we want to see more local governments, more companies, more organizations give people opportunities to become gainfully employed once they've paid their debt to society. So thank you.
And we still haven't fully, a lot of the other thing I'll mention is that sometimes we pass legislation here in the state, but don't implement it in the right way.
Oh, you said it.
Sometimes nobody even knows that the change exists. So we have to pay attention to the implementation component as well. That
is absolutely one of the things that we push for is accountability with our elected officials and making sure that the votes they take are votes that support their communities and that they're tracking the money, the policies back to local communities. So you're so right that there are oftentimes we're not aware that things have happened and there's no follow-up and no implementation. And we need to be aware of that. There's one other issue that we want to talk about, and I'll start with you, Vidi, because I think you have, a different view of this because you were born and raised in Michigan. So the city of Jackson has gone through, one of the worst water crises that we have seen ever. In this country. And it's largely in part to the disinvestment of funding and support from the state, as well as some mismanagement that has happened over the course of several administrations and how to address the issues with the water system, leading to a lot of economic and mental distress for the citizens of Jackson. As you're seeing people go through this and being challenged by this, and as you and both Rakia are in Jackson and you're having to deal with the challenges of not having water or not having access to safe drinking water, what are some of the policy decisions that led us to this crisis that we faced?
Thank you for that question. It's a really important one, and it's incredibly timely. Before I answer this question, I do want to clarify that my comments today are my personal comments, and I think it's especially important to clarify that before I start talking now, because I am a resident of Jackson. I'm a proud resident of Jackson. When I moved here 4 years ago, I made a very active decision to live in Jackson, and I've made an active decision to stay in Jackson, and I spend my money in Jackson. I try not to leave Jackson if I can avoid it. And that's because I love Jackson. I love this city. And I tell a lot of folks, I grew up outside of Detroit. I know Rukia is originally from Detroit as well, Jackson and Detroit are kindred spirits. They are very similar places. Detroit has had a resurgence, a renaissance in the last 15 years or so. And I could speak a lot about that, but I'm not here to talk about Detroit. But I think it's important to see the parallels between a city like Jackson and a city like Detroit. These are two Black cities. These are two cities that are rooted in Blackness, that are rooted in community, and that have strong, strong histories of organizing. That's partially why we have the Lumumba family here in Jackson. And, I think it's important to compare a city like Jackson compare it to a city like Detroit. And even a little closer, to compare a city like Jackson to a city like Birmingham, and ask ourselves, why does Jackson struggle so much? Why are we not getting over this hump? And in my personal opinion, the answer is the state. It's the legislature. It is our state leaders that are actively choosing to disinvest from the city of Jackson. That is really frustrating to me as somebody who has lived in other big cities, who have seen other big cities. It shocks me that our leadership, our state leadership, is so interested in disinvesting from our capital city. It makes absolutely no sense. But because of that disinvestment, we just don't have the money or the resources to build out the infrastructure that we really need for a city of this size. And, we look at the water issue that happened here. This happens across the country. There are infrastructure problems affecting water systems all across the country, and we are going to see more and more of this in major cities across the country as the years pass on. Here in Jackson, though, one of the biggest problems is that we're just not getting the support that we need from our own folks. So if we're not getting our own folks in the legislature to allocate money to the city of Jackson to fix this problem, how are we going to solve the problem? We don't have the funds. I mean, I'm paying my taxes. I'm sure Rukia's paying her taxes. Everybody's paying their taxes. We're paying our bills, but it's not enough. We know it's not enough. And the only way to get that support is for money to be allocated to the city by the state and also by the federal government. But when our state leaders have no interest in working with the city, they have no interest in elevating the city, they have no interest in uplifting the city, we're not going to get the solutions that we need. And the reason I said that, I compare it to Detroit is because Detroit had lost a ton of its population. Its infrastructure was crumbling. And part of the reason why it's changed a lot in the past 15 years is there's been a lot of reinvestment in the city. Folks are committed to the city. It's not all good. Don't get me wrong, but there's been reinvestment in the city. How do we get that investment in the city? But, we have to do it without the support of our state leadership, which seems antithetical to the kind of work that we actually need to do. So, this is a really long-winded way of saying we all need to get along, and we all need to recognize that the success of Jackson is the success of Mississippi.
Couldn't have said it better, Vinny. Absolutely. 100% correct. Rakia, would you like to respond or add to Vinny's comments?
I mean, Vidya said it all. Right on point. Right on point. You know, one of the so we're stuck in this extremely challenging period of time where we know that they're depriving Jackson of resources based on race and economics, right? And we have an opportunity to not only hold them accountable, but to also chart a new course, to begin to look at what does it mean to develop some more self-sustaining solutions here in the city. What does it mean to invest in cooperatives and other ways that residents with a very with a tax base where we have 24% of our tax base that is living below the poverty line? How do we create a solidarity economy, an economy that allows for all of us to have the benefits regardless of our economic status? So, for example, you know, what does it mean to ensure that we have healthy grocery stores in all of our communities? Well, one way to do that, and that community members in that area are invested in that. One way to do that is to actually create cooperative opportunities for residents to have a share in that grocery store, to actually be members of that grocery store and can have the produce and the things that they buy for a little cheaper. I say all that to say that absolutely we have to do what Vinny's talking about and hold the state accountable. And while we're doing that, we need to begin to trot our own course. We need to be able to think of the alternatives. We need to dream big and think about how can we be self-sustaining, so it doesn't matter what the state does. We're going to get the state's money and we're going to have our own as well, right? So that's the only thing that I would add. And yep.
Thank you for that. I felt like, you know, we were about to, you have an amen corner, and thought we were about to hear you declare that you were about to run for office. That sounded so good over here. Mr. Davis, I saw you nodding your head a little bit in agreement with Rakia, and she was talking about cooperative economics. Would like to hear a little bit more from you on your thoughts on that.
Well, that's one of the, I agree with that, because that's one of the things that we talk about in my shop all the time. I'm like, why don't we have a way that we invest our money into our own neighborhood? Like, we don't have that access, and then we steadily see other people come into our neighborhood, invest in our neighborhood, and take the money away. Mm-hmm. We don't even have a way to invest in our own neighborhood. So I 100% agree with that, and that's what I've actually been trying to work around, to try to find a way to get so we could invest in our neighborhood, especially like up there in Canton. I stay in Ridgeland, but Canton is my home. I care a lot. I care a lot about the neighborhood. I care a lot about the kids, about the community. I've been cutting kids' hair since they was babies. So now they graduated and going on to college and stuff like that. It's a point in life where these kids' life should be invested into. You know what I mean? Right. When a child is young, I feel that it should be a way that we all should invest in our own kids. These kids that are smart, these kids that are real handy, have certain skills. I think we should invest in these in our community and into our kids, into our community. But no one's doing that. So that's why a lot of people, they have lost hope, because, as I always say, the love is gone. Yeah, you know. It's been I'm gonna make a lot of sense with this. I know the women, I'm gonna salute you women, one thing about it, because y'all have held the household down for long enough. I've been telling guys that it's time that we step up to the plate as men. I feel like a lot of us has been ostracized, and to the point that where they say, well, we gang members or this or that. But they got Republican, they got Democrat, they got this and that, and all these different groups. but they have outcasted certain people in our community to make us feel like, hey, we don't belong, or we're not a part of the community, which we are. We're fathers. To me, there's a saying where they say a black man leaves his family. I don't know black men that I don't know black men that leave their family, just walk off from their family. There's gonna be circumstances in that home that's gonna be put before him. They're gonna say either you go or it's gonna be harder for us. And a lot of time, the man he got to go to make it better for his family. So, like I said, it should be a way where we can invest in our own communities, build up our own communities. A lot of people have money. I have money to invest. A lot of people have money to invest. We take it to the banks, just sitting there and they invest it. So, why we not buying land and building up homes and providing jobs for the kids? We want to take the guns out of their hands. Let's take the guns out of their hands and put some hammers and some nails in their hands.
All right now.
Right.
I agree, Mr. Davis. Got everybody nodding their heads that we're in agreement, and we want to see some of those things implemented and happen. So we have just a few minutes left on our panel, and so what the whole point of this panel is to get people to understand that the policy decisions that are made at City Hall, at the county board of supervisors, with the state legislature, with Congress, impacts everything about how we live, our quality of life, the support we get with welfare or Social Security or any of the programs, those safety net programs that we depend on to be able to make ends meet. And we need people to understand that the way that your voice is heard, the way you can make a difference is to vote. So we know that there are a lot of barriers to voting, and a lot of people, as you said, Mr. Davis, feel like sometimes their vote just does not count.
Right.
How can we inspire more people to get up in 2 weeks from today, and go vote? What are some things that, and I would like to hear this, a response to this from all of the panelists. What more can we do, or what should we be doing to drive more people to the polls? Then we'll start with you, Mr. Davis.
Okay. I think to get people out to vote, a lot of people don't understand why they should vote. They feel they don't have a reason to vote because we're not going to get the outcome that we're looking for. I just got through listening to everybody talk about, the government and this and that. And then after all these years, we've been fighting, but the fight has ceased. I think now the fight has begun again. And I think now is the time to rally people up, because right now people really realize that they do need to vote because of some of the things that are happening in society. You go look at the TANF, the thing that's going on with the TANF in the state.
Yes.
A lot of people are looking at that like that money was intended for needy families. Like, that money was intended for the poor people of Mississippi. They took the money and just were giving them, just throwing the millions of dollars around. Even $100, in most of these houses, $10 can change a person's whole week. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes down to voting, people want to know that, hey, if I vote, are things gonna change? If I vote, are they gonna still be the same? And as y'all know, in Mississippi, like it has not been a lot of change. So at the local level, like we was just talking about, we see black faces. We see black faces without progress. We see black faces without progress because a lot of people, it's like a popularity contest. We don't need a popularity contest. We need the people that know what they're doing. They can get there and get the job handled. And I just think that we should pick candidates as a people that we want to stand behind, because we're giving candidates that we don't even know anything about. We don't know what we vote. We don't know what they're doing. A lot of them, we feel like, oh, it's just going to get up there and do the same thing that the next person did. But they're not like that. It's so many roadblocks in front of them that they can't get done. But like I said, it's just that, to the point that people want to know that if they vote, it counts. And I think now is the time to rally up and get people out to vote, because right now we really see everybody. We really see that it's time to vote and get some changes in Mississippi.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. So that's giving people the why, making sure they understand why they need to vote and why their vote counts.
Sure.
Thank you for that, Mr. Davis, and thank you for being here with us. Rakia?
So, definitely. Thank you, Mr. Davis. That was, on point. And I would say, for me, when people are skeptical of voting, I try to remind them that it's a harm reduction act. So, yeah, you may not trust this person. Yeah, you may not believe that they're going to do the best job. But we're trying to reduce the harm to our communities, to our people. And so all we're asking you to do is take the step to prevent us from being in greater jeopardy, at greater risk. We saw what happened, right, in 2016 with Trump, right? And how those lingering effects, the effect of that has lingered across our communities, have emboldened, white supremacists to not only run for office, but also to use a lot of our narrative to convince a lot of our people, right? A lot of our folks, even within Black community, to come over to their side, to begin to vote in a different way, right? That is anti to what is needed for their community. And so, we got to be careful with our inaction, and just reminding folks that it's just one of the many tools in our arsenal that we must utilize to ensure that we have, safe, well, and when I say safe, I don't just mean against violence by individuals. I mean violence that is committed by poor policy instituted by the state. And so we have to recognize that our actions sometimes are harm reducers, is an act of harm reduction. So.
Wow, that is a great way to look at that, Rakia. Thank you so much for sharing that, because oftentimes people think if you don't vote, it doesn't matter. But inaction is harmful to community as well. So thank you for that. Vinny, can you close us out?
Yes, I'd love to. I wholeheartedly agree with both what Mr. Davis and Rakia said, and I was going to pivot a little bit in my response here. And one thing that I want to think about when talking to folks about voting is, if folks haven't voted or they're choosing not to vote, I want to know why they are not voting. Sometimes it might be they don't trust the system. And that's fair. And that's where Rakia comes in. That's where that harm reduction conversation comes in. But sometimes people don't vote because the system doesn't allow them to vote for a myriad of reasons. It could be something, they don't have childcare. They've got to work during the time that polls are open. They don't know who to vote for. So why go to the polls if I don't know who's on the ballot? There are a lot of reasons why people don't vote. And I think for those of us who work in this space, who have a little more time or ability to engage in this space, we have a responsibility to work with people to understand why they don't vote. So whether it's having that harm reduction conversation, or you talk to somebody who says, I don't have childcare, and offering, hey, do you want me to come and watch your kids for an hour while you go to the polls? Or, if somebody is going to be working a shift, you're actually entitled to some time off to vote. Let me help you advocate for that time off to vote. Or helping somebody fill out a mail-in ballot. We have to make sure that everybody has all the information at their disposal and is able to utilize that information to empower them to vote. So I think, what Mr. Davis and Rakia said are vitally important, but we've got to make sure that we're meeting people where they are. Which is what both of them said. And I'm just here, I guess it's the lawyer in me that's saying, let's figure out how to solve the problem in this way.
Absolutely. But thank you all so much.
But Phaedra, before we wrap up, we do have a question that was very pressing for someone. So we're going to take liberty. You can't tell a Delta woman anything. and ask this one last question before we wrap up. And it is an extremely important question. And it was, what are some of the things citizens can do to ensure implementation is taking place after those policies are passed or put into place? Many people spoke you all spoke of the issue of the laws are sometimes on the books, but they're not being implemented. So, what are some everyday things that people can do to hold their lawmakers accountable, to have them read the laws that they passed or that were passed and make them put them to work? And that will be our last question. Jump in there, anyone. I'm throwing it back to Phaedra for moderating for that. Or Phaedra, you can answer that question as well if you feel so led.
Well, we have these experts. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. I've learned so much, and I've really been inspired by the words I heard tonight from our panel. But some of the things that we could do to make sure that that the laws are being implemented is, as all the panelists have said, you have to be engaged. You have to know what's going on yourself in order to hold somebody accountable. So pay attention to what's being passed. Making sure you're connecting to those grassroots organizations that are putting out information about policies. One of the tools that Rakia mentioned was the policy tracker that Mississippi Votes has, looking at things like that puts the information in a format that's understandable for you so that you can read it, know what it's saying, know how it impacts you, and then have that conversation with your policymakers. One of the things that we find is that there's a lot of apathy in Mississippi. We elect people, but we don't talk to them after they're elected and hold them accountable. We have to continue to do the work. The first step is voting. We have to do that step first, but after we vote, pay attention, get engaged, hold them accountable by asking questions, showing up at town hall meetings. They have access through their email, through their secretaries, through their offices. They have support people in place. Call them, schedule time to meet with them, and not just with you. You have other concerned citizens. Mr. Davis said they have people where he's gathering people in his barbershop. Well, invite an elected official into that space and ask those hard questions, because they're there to serve you, not the other way around. One thing that Mr. Davis said, we make this a popularity contest. Well, if you want to stay popular, then you have to do the work. And if you want them to stay in office, especially in our smaller areas across the state of Mississippi, every vote counts. We've had people who have lost elections by 3 or 4 votes in some of our cities and some of our counties. So every vote matters, and we have to get people to the polls to vote. And then we have to continue that process by educating ourselves on these policies, connecting with other concerned citizens and organizations to make sure we know what's going on. We can't just listen to the news. We absolutely cannot get our information just from the news. It's going to take work, and it could just be one issue. You might only be interested in education, but Mr. Davis is talking about cooperative economics. So I will handle my little piece. I work with him to help him with his little piece, and together we've covered 2 critical issues that's important for our community. So again, vote, stay engaged, and ask those critical questions. Yeah. So that would be my 2 cents. I, again, have thoroughly enjoyed being here. Again, thank you to the Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta for hosting this forum. The more information we can get in the hands of people, the more informed people are, the better we can move as a community to try to make the changes that we want to see on these critical issues. Every policy decision made impacts your personal life. And if it's not yours, it's your parents, it's your child, it's your grandchild. All of these things that these people do that we send to the Capitol matters. And we need to track everything they're doing so we will know how we need to move when they return home. We don't need to make home comfortable for them if they're making our homes uncomfortable for us.
Right.
So that's
Mhm.
all. Letitia, is there anything else that we need to do for the good of the order?
You have been so succinct and on point. I don't have anything else but other than to first of all thank each and one of you for joining us, for bringing your knowledge, your passion, and everything to this panel. It was a great accomplishment, and I do hope that whatever was said, heard, or done will be heard here and shared far and wide. The only thing I have to add is we vote in 2 weeks. Have you a voting plan? There, Vidi, if you don't mind, if you could give out that voter protection number. I'm sorry, I put you on the spot.
I don't know it off the top of my head, unfortunately.
No worries. We will share it some way through our social media. So if you're having problems at the polls, you will be okay.
And,
There
and
are.
I was
Go
just
ahead, I'm
going to
sorry.
say, if you go to onevoicems.org, it'll pop right up.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Lumumba. So onevoicems.com, correct?
Org.
.org, onevoicems.org for the voter protection hotline. Again, I want to say on behalf of our chapter president, Ms. Nikisha Davis, our first vice president, Ms. Wanaki Taylor, and our second vice president, Ms. Latoya Reed, I want to thank you all on behalf of the Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. And all I can say is your vote matters and make it count. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.